right. So thank you, Cecilia. What I enjoyed about her talk is that we can actually see how her data confirms what we were anticipating even before sugar started to load. So I summarized her main findings in the next 3 bullet points. So low sugar concentration at the end of period 4. So that is when sugar stops accumulating, there is still more volume relative to the amount of sugar that has been stored. Secondly, many sites did actually show early sugar loading stop and many blockages, and we have means of interpreting it simply by relating high leaf-to-fruit ratio with vapor pressure deficit occurring more often. Still, we should not discard the fact that some nice maturation profile have been observed in almost 50% of the cases, probably the ones that had a weaker development of leaf area. So the next question is, all right, we know sugar is a signaling molecule for color. If we use color as a proxy for phenolic maturity, what it is we expect? Well, we should expect a slow or a stopped color accumulation in all the sites where we have observed a sugar accumulation blockage. It should be, unlike previous years, difficult to pinpoint when the peak of color is observed. Typically in the past, we observed it 200 growing degree days after the peak of sugar. But this year, actually, in many sites, we could not identify if a peak of color had been observed. It's as if by the time harvest occurred, the plant was still processing more color accumulation. And on top of that, while color is accumulated on sites where there is a high berry temperature increase due to heat wave, maybe combined with more severe water deficit, we have a more drastic loss of color. So I've tried to synthesize that into this graph. You see, in 2018, we had a period 2 that stops before veraison. So that's period 2, that's period 3, and that's the veraison. Then we had a sugar loading period that on average stopped around September 20. We had some variations between site to site, but these variations was fairly narrow. And then we had an extended period 5 to wait until color reaches its peak. Flavor development, as Cecilia was saying, is in the window you want it to be based on your production objectives, and then you harvest. Different picture in 2019 where on average we saw no period 3, so just an everlasting period 2, bringing more leaf area development. A period 4 that is not so well defined to the point that we observed the first sugar loading stop end of August, with some sites keeping the sugar loading until the end of September. So more heterogeneity here in terms of when to see the completion of maturation. This means that the start of color accumulation was further delayed, and maybe in some sites, here that's what the question mark is for, harvest date had to be programmed before the peak of color has been reached. And all of that was already hidden in a way in this long period 2. So what I want to stretch out here is that wine composition, wine operation are so intimately linked to what's happening before the solstice in the same year. So in conclusion, low vigor sites, probably a high quality vintage. Why? Because the conditions helped an improved vineyard balance due to more vigor in sites that usually are lacking vigor, so a better leaf to fruit ratio. The benefits of having a smaller root reservoir size is that it minimized leaf area development compared to high vigor sites, thus reduced the risk of disease pressure. It increased the chance of a short duration period 3. Having a period 3 before veraison increases the potential for higher coloration and higher flavonoids potential. However, as I was announcing at the end of period 2, it's a challenging vineyard for high vigor sites. It's a Bordeaux-like vintage. Typically in Bordeaux, we rarely observe period 3. But unlike Bordeaux, we have those high-frequency heat waves during the maturation period. That means that photosynthesis and sugar loading will be more likely to be disrupted by a combination of root water shortage combined with heat wave during both period 4 and period 5, leading to cavitation. That means a less efficient way of translocating nutrients and carbohydrates from the leaves to the fruit. And also, due to these compounded consequences of delayed periods happening later than later, the peak of color hasn't been reached due to a delay in sugar loading in many situations. Last, we should expect more variations from bottle to bottle due to terroir variations being more likely to be expressed in the maturation. Site-specific factors that will reduce the amount of fruit exposure to sun or to high temperature will be particularly discriminatory in a year like 2019. Those differences can be attributed to a topography effect, for instance, a slope that's facing the north. Lower soil water holding capacity, meaning that some areas of your vineyards may actually have performed extremely well in years where they lack this extra amount of leaves to mature fully. Protective leaf layers in fruit zone might have been an added benefit in areas that are in general too weak. And then for those that have misters, you've been able to combat the detrimental impact of those 5 heat waves reaching very high values by essentially muting them with misters. Those terroir-specific features may be responsible for an absence of sugar loading disorders, so hence the role of these 60% of good blocks that Cecilia highlighted. And on those blocks, we should expect to see peak color with a good pigmentation of anthocyanin with tannins. And the last slide, the effects, putting in perspective the effects of vineyard operation in 2019, probably no need to irrigate priveraison, except in sites with small root reservoirs. The challenge is more focusing on achieving a good water management during period 4 and period 5. And very important in the future, and here I'm looping with what Greg was showing at the start of the conference, disentangle lack of soil moisture from heat wave symptoms on berry susceptibility to maturation disorder. Also think, if we won't suffer from a lack of early water supply from rainfall, but if we suffer from more frequent heat waves, that the use of misters might actually be a more strategic implementation to have in your vineyards as opposed to irrigation. And also try to rethink with more strategic edge the timing and intensity of your canopy manipulations. And that will wrap up what essentially I wanted to share with you before introducing the panel of winemakers. So thank you.